Sometimes the loudest applause comes from the same people who once tried to bury you. They just didn't expect you to bloom in public. There's something almost cinematic about watching someone handle a disgusting situation with elegance instead of rage. It's like watching a bomb get diffused with a smile. You know it could have exploded, but somehow you walk away impressed by the calm precision. Studies even show that people who maintain composure in moments of humiliation are perceived as more powerful than those who retaliate, because control looks like confidence, and chaos looks like insecurity wearing perfume. You didn't shout. You didn't clap back. You didn't post subliminals or gather pity likes. You just stood there, clean, collected, unbothered, while life tested your emotional plumbing. And what's wild is, people noticed. They might not say it out loud, but deep down, everyone saw how you handled it. Some admired you, some envied you. A few probably tried to recreate your calm and ended up blocking 3 people before lunch. But here's what they'll never understand. Your silence wasn't ignorance, it was intelligence. You understood that reacting would have fed the fire, and instead you chose to let their flames burn out in their own smoke. You didn't need revenge. Reality was already working overtime on your behalf. So now, people are impressed, not because you won an argument, but because you mastered yourself. In a world addicted to overreaction, you became the plot twist, the one who kept it together when everyone else wanted to see you fall apart. And that is exactly where your story begins. Number 1, you didn't react. You recalibrated. When chaos came for you, everyone expected a show. They wanted you to lose control, to break character, to give them the satisfaction of seeing you crumble under pressure. But you didn't. You stayed still long enough to read the room, the motive, and the trap. You understood that reacting would only feed their narrative, so instead you paused, not because you were weak, but because you were recalculating your next move. That's the difference between being reactive and being strategic. You didn't freeze, you assessed. People often confuse calmness with confusion, but yours wasn't hesitation. It was intelligence at work. You let the noise play out while you quietly studied who was clapping and who was plotting. You noticed the shifts, the subtle betrayals, the way people's true colors always show under fluorescent pressure. You didn't rush to respond because you knew that when emotions drive decisions, disaster rides shotgun. Instead, you gave yourself the luxury of clarity before action. That kind of composure terrifies people. It unnerves them when they can't predict your next move, when they can't feed off your reaction, because in their minds, chaos is power. But you flipped the script. You showed that calm is the ultimate dominance. When you refused to dance to their dysfunction, you forced them to stumble to the rhythm of their own madness. You didn't suppress your emotions, you redirected them. You let logic take the wheel and emotion ride in the back seat, seatbelt on. You reminded yourself that not every insult deserves an answer, not every provocation deserves presence. Sometimes maturity isn't about rising above. It's about staying grounded when everyone else is floating on delusion. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't match their energy, you mastered yours. You understood that reacting is temporary control, but recalibrating is permanent power. You didn't win by fighting harder, you won by thinking sharper. That's what separates survivors from strategists, the ability to stay centered when the world around you tries to pull you off balance. Number 2, you let exposure do its job. You learned that truth doesn't need a lawyer, it just needs time. When people tried to twist your story, you didn't rush to correct every rumor or defend every lie. You understood that explanations often sound like desperation, and you refused to beg for understanding from those committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you stepped back and let exposure do what exposure always does, reveal. You knew that falsehood has an expiration date. Lies travel fast, but they burn out just as quickly when there's no oxygen from your reaction to keep them alive. So you stopped feeding the fire. You didn't chase gossip down back alleys or try to control what others said. You let the noise echo until it collapsed under its own emptiness. That kind of restraint is rare because most people crave instant justice. You, however, were patient enough to let time deliver a version of justice that's undeniable. And when the truth finally surfaced, it hit harder because you never forced it. The same mouths that whispered behind your back started choking on their own words. Those who laughed at your silence began to realize it wasn't weakness. It was warning. You had given them enough rope, and they used it exactly as expected. That's the quiet brilliance of self-control. It doesn't argue, it documents. People don't forget the moment they realize they were wrong about you. It burns in their memory longer than any speech could. Your stillness made their betrayal louder. Your peace made their performance embarrassing. In trying to expose you, they ended up revealing themselves. You didn't have to play detective. Truth handled that for you. By not reacting, you let reality write the ending on your behalf. And when it did, it was poetic. Because nothing humbles deception more than having to face its own reflection, and nothing empowers you more than watching the truth defend you while you say absolutely nothing. Number 3, you handled filth like a surgeon, not a spectator. When people tried to drag you through the mud, you didn't dive in to wrestle with them. You dissected the situation with precision. You didn't act out of emotion. You acted with awareness. You treated the whole thing like a contamination that needed to be handled carefully, not something to be entertained or exaggerated. You identified the infection, addressed it cleanly, and refused to let it spread into your peace. That's what separates those who heal from those who spiral. You didn't let other people's dirt stain your character. You saw their intentions clearly. The gossip, the manipulation, the subtle digs. They all had one goal: to provoke you. They wanted to see you react recklessly so they could point and say, "See, they're no better." But instead you became methodical. You analyzed their behavior like a professional cutting away dead tissue, removing toxicity without damaging your integrity. You didn't seek revenge, you sought resolution. You didn't need to make a scene, you made a decision to stay clean in a contaminated environment. That takes emotional discipline most people never develop. Because filth loves company. It wants you rolling in it, defending yourself, getting angry, losing focus. But you refuse to entertain their drama because you knew how costly it is to engage with people who thrive on chaos. You realized that your reaction was their reward, and you weren't about to give them that satisfaction. Your calm became their exposure. The more you handled things with clarity, the more unhinged they looked. The same people who expected you to explode ended up revealing their own instability. You didn't fight dirty, you fought smart. You didn't let their negativity infect your energy, and that alone disarmed their entire plan. You turned a disgusting situation into a clean extraction. You didn't need validation or vengeance, just precision. You proved that the best way to deal with filth isn't to throw more dirt, but to stay so composed that the mess can't touch you. Number 4, you chose dignity over victory. There came a moment when you could have easily fought back, exposed everything, and embarrassed everyone who tried to humiliate you. You had the evidence, the opportunity, and every reason to return the fire. But instead of reacting from anger, you chose to respond from awareness. You understood something most people never do, that winning through rage isn't really winning at all. It's just proving you can lose your character faster than they can lose theirs. So you stepped back, not because you couldn't fight, but because you refused to lower your frequency to match theirs. You decided that your peace was more valuable than being proven right in front of people who already made up their minds. You realize that dignity isn't silence, it's control. It's the decision to keep your soul intact when everything around you is trying to make you unrecognizable. You let them talk, distort, and assume, knowing that peace isn't passive. It's power that doesn't need an audience. That kind of control unsettles people who survive on chaos, because they can't manipulate what doesn't react. Your restraint was your strength in disguise. While they were loud, you were learning. While they were dramatic, you were evolving. You didn't need to clap back because you knew that time has the best memory. It never forgets who played dirty and who walked away clean. And when the truth eventually surfaced, it hit harder because you didn't have to force it. You let it unfold naturally, with grace. You turned what could have been a public battle into a private lesson. You realized that integrity outlasts every temporary victory. You showed that not every win needs to be loud, and not every loss means defeat. Sometimes the real triumph is walking away with your spirit untouched. You didn't lose, you just refused to win the wrong way. And that's the kind of victory that never expires. Number 5, you let silence become strategy, not surrender. Your silence wasn't fear, it was focus. While others mistook your quiet for confusion, you were watching patterns form, intentions reveal themselves, and alliances shift in real time. You understood that every reaction reveals information, so you kept yours minimal and meaningful. You weren't retreating, you were studying. Because silence, when used wisely, isn't weakness, it's intelligence with discipline. You saw that people expose themselves faster when you stop explaining yourself. They start talking more, showing more, revealing what they thought you'd never notice. And you noticed everything. You paid attention to tone, timing, and behavior. You watched who stayed neutral, who switched sides, and who couldn't resist trying to provoke a response. You didn't interrupt the performance. You let it play out. Because time is the best interrogator, and you gave it the floor. Your quiet became their confusion. They couldn't figure out if you were plotting or processing. They couldn't read your next move, and that made them nervous. In a world where everyone overshares, mystery is unsettling. You turned your silence into pressure, not through intimidation, but through unpredictability. That's power most people don't recognize until it's too late. And when you finally did speak, it wasn't noise. It was precision. Every word hit with the weight of wisdom, not emotion. That's what makes your approach dangerous in the best way. You don't argue, you analyze, you don't react fast, you react right. Silence gave you what shouting never could, clarity. It allowed you to separate what was real from what was reactionary. You stopped giving explanations to people who only listened to reply, not to understand. And by doing so, you mastered the art of letting time reveal what your words never had to. You turned quiet into control, and that's something no argument can compete with. Number 6, you refused to play the villain. They scripted for you. They tried to paint you as the problem, the unstable one, the aggressor, the difficult one. They built a storyline where you were meant to lose your composure so their lies would look believable. Every move they made was designed to provoke you, to get a reaction that would fit the version of you they rehearsed in private conversations. But you didn't take the bait. You saw the setup for what it was, a performance. And the moment you refused to play your assigned role, their script began to fall apart. They wanted your outrage because your anger would have been their evidence. But you understood that emotional control is the sharpest form of revenge. Instead of reacting, you responded with calm. You let them perform their drama while you maintained your dignity. Every insult they threw became an unintentional confession, every accusation a mirror reflecting their own behavior. You didn't have to expose them. They did it themselves by trying too hard to make you the villain. That's what true strength looks like, refusing to let someone else dictate your character. You didn't argue your innocence, you lived it. You didn't need to scream the truth, you embodied it. And when people saw the difference between their words and your composure, the truth became undeniable. You transformed their manipulation into evidence simply by not participating in their chaos. Your calm dismantled their entire plan. You made them look unbalanced, not by trying to, but by staying grounded. While they scrambled to keep their story alive, your stillness became the proof that you never belonged in their narrative to begin with. They wanted a reaction. You gave them reflection. They wanted a fight. You gave them silence. You didn't just refuse the role, you rewrote the whole story. You showed that the real villain is the one who needs a lie to make themselves look right, and the real victor is the one who doesn't need to play along to prove their worth. Number 7, you became the mirror. They couldn't stand to see. Your composure became a reflection they couldn't escape. Every time they tried to provoke you, your calmness threw their ugliness right back at them. You didn't need to insult, defend, or explain. Your steadiness did all the talking. They saw themselves in your silence, and it terrified them. Because when someone thrives on control, nothing unsettles them more than realizing their manipulation isn't working. You became the mirror that revealed everything they tried to hide from others and from themselves. The truth is, people like that can't stand facing a version of themselves that isn't edited by ego. Your restraint stripped away their performance. Every act of grace from you made their pettiness more obvious. Every measured response highlighted how impulsive and vindictive they were. You didn't have to expose them publicly. Your calm made their dysfunction impossible to disguise. That's what real composure does. It doesn't just protect your peace, it amplifies the truth around you. They wanted to make you look unhinged, but instead, they ended up looking desperate. They expected chaos, but you gave them control. They expected drama, but you gave them discipline. And in that unexpected contrast, everyone watching started to notice the difference. You didn't ruin their reputation. They did that themselves by trying to destroy yours. When you refused to match their energy, you forced them to sit in the discomfort of their own reflection. You didn't punish them with revenge, you punished them with exposure, the kind that doesn't come from words but from behavior revealed in daylight. The harder they tried to make you look small, the more they shrank beside your composure. You became their unfiltered truth. Your calm was their consequence. Because when integrity stands still long enough, deceit eventually stumbles into its own shadow. And that's exactly what happened. You didn't destroy them. Reality did, and all you had to do was stay still long enough to let the mirror do its job. Number 8, you understood that retaliation is a tax on evolution. You realize that every time you react out of anger, you pay with your peace. Retaliation might feel satisfying in the moment, but it's expensive. It drains your focus, delays your growth, and keeps you tied to the very people you've outgrown. You understood that vengeance is a luxury for those who have nothing better to build, and you were already too invested in your own transformation to waste energy on proving a point. So instead of fighting to be right, you chose to rise and be free. You saw how the cycle works. They provoke, you respond, and suddenly you're trapped in the same energy you were meant to escape. You stopped participating in that emotional economy. You refused to trade your progress for petty victories. That's not weakness. That's financial wisdom for the soul. You realized that peace isn't free. It's paid for with restraint, and you were willing to make that investment. There's a rare kind of strength in walking away when you could destroy someone but choose not to. You understood that retaliation keeps you operating at their level, and you were already building on a higher frequency. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was savings. You protected your emotional wealth by not spending it on people who only deal in chaos. Every insult, every betrayal, every cheap shot was an invoice trying to charge you in emotional currency, and you declined the payment. You chose elevation over exchange. You used the pain as motivation, the disappointment as data, and the experience as education. You learned that not everything needs a response. Some things just need distance and time to reveal their true value. You didn't let revenge rob you of refinement. You realized that the greatest clapback is progress, becoming so untouchable that they have to watch your growth from the sidelines. You didn't lose your cool, you leveled up your worth. Because the truth is, every moment spent plotting revenge is a moment stolen from your own evolution, and you refuse to pay that tax. Number 9, you turned humiliation into documentation. You stopped seeing your humiliation as something to hide and started treating it as proof of what you've survived. You didn't delete it from your memory. You documented it, stored it, studied it. Every insult became a record of how much you've endured without breaking. Every betrayal became a reminder of who deserves a seat at your table and who never should have been invited in the first place. You transformed what was meant to destroy you into a personal archive of strength. You understood that humiliation isn't the end. It's data. It's information about how people treat you when they think you're vulnerable. Instead of dwelling on the pain, you took notes. You learned the patterns, the tone, the timing of betrayal. You saw who mocked, who vanished, and who quietly supported you when it was risky to do so. You collected those moments not out of bitterness, but as evidence, receipts of growth and proof of awareness. Because experience without reflection is wasted pain, and you weren't about to waste yours. You didn't let shame silence you. You let it sharpen you. You allowed the uncomfortable truth of how people behave to teach you where your boundaries belong. You didn't just heal, you evolved with documentation to back it up. That's why your peace now feels earned, not borrowed. You know exactly what it cost. Their cruelty became your curriculum. What they called embarrassment became your education. You didn't just move on, you moved differently. You learned to trust patterns over promises, behavior over apologies. And now, the same moments that once hurt you have become proof of how much wiser you are. You turned humiliation into a historical record of your resilience. You didn't erase the story. You kept it as evidence that nothing they tried could stop you. You became your own case study in survival, and the conclusion is undeniable. You didn't just endure the worst, you built something unshakable from it. Number 10, you mastered emotional minimalism. You reached a point where you realized not everyone deserves access to your full emotional range. You stopped overfeeding people with attention, empathy, and energy when all they offered in return were crumbs of loyalty and inconsistency. You learned that love without reciprocity is charity, and you retired from emotional charity work. That shift wasn't bitterness, it was balance. You began treating your peace like property, private, valuable, and not open for public use. You became intentional with your reactions. No more draining monologues trying to explain what respect should already make clear. No more exhausting yourself to prove your point to people committed to misunderstanding you. You discovered that not every situation deserves your full emotional budget. Some things just need a nod, a noted, or complete silence. That's not detachment. That's emotional intelligence refined through experience. You understood that people test boundaries not to learn, but to see what they can get away with. And instead of matching their chaos, you started adjusting your access. You realized that control isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering your own responses. You no longer react just because someone wants a reaction. You speak when it matters, respond when it's worth it, and disengage when peace is the better answer. This kind of calm unnerves people who thrive on emotional excess. They call you cold, distant, or heartless because they can't manipulate what's measured. But you know the truth. Minimalism isn't about caring less. It's about caring wisely. You've learned that energy is currency, and you spend it like someone who finally knows its value. Your restraint became your refinement. Your silence became your filter. You stopped performing empathy for people who only came to take, and in doing so you became emotionally wealthy. Because real strength isn't in reacting more, it's in reacting less, and meaning every move you make. Number 11, you made decency look dangerous. You didn't realize it at first, but your calm became a threat. In a world where everyone feeds off outrage, gossip, and petty confrontation, you showed up with maturity, and it made people nervous. You weren't loud, messy, or reactionary. You didn't compete in the chaos. You carried yourself with dignity, and that made you unpredictable. To people addicted to drama, peace is unsettling. It's the one thing they can't manipulate or measure, and that's why your decency started to look like defiance. Your refusal to engage in their nonsense exposed how desperate they were for attention. When you didn't play along, their tactics lost power. You didn't chase rumors, defend yourself in group chats, or try to win sympathy online. You just kept moving, calm, clear, and consistent. That quiet control scared people who only feel powerful when others are emotional. They expected reaction, but you gave them reflection. You turned every provocation into a mirror that showed them how unstable they truly were. You became proof that maturity isn't soft, it's strategic. You didn't need to explode to be heard or cause chaos to be noticed. Your self-control made noise without saying a word. And that's the thing. In a culture that glorifies drama, discipline looks suspicious. People start wondering how you're so composed, how you're not losing sleep, how you're still glowing while they're stuck in confusion. It's almost offensive to them that you didn't crumble where they expected you to. But your calm wasn't fake. It was forged through lessons, boundaries, and self-respect. You understood that not reacting isn't weakness. It's choosing not to let fools rent space in your head. And now, your decency stands out because it's rare. You made kindness look like rebellion and peace look like power. You didn't have to fight for the spotlight. Your energy became the proof that real strength doesn't need an audience. Number 12, you proved that restraint is the new revolution. When everything in you wanted to respond, you didn't. You held your composure like a weapon, not out of fear, but out of conviction. You understood that the loudest act of rebellion in a world addicted to reaction is restraint. Anyone can explode, anyone can curse, clap back, or seek revenge. But it takes a different kind of power to stay centered when you're being pulled in every direction. You mastered that power. You chose stillness in a culture that equates noise with strength, and that's what made your restraint revolutionary. People wanted you to lose control so they could call you unstable. They wanted you to lash out so they could say, "See, we were right about them." But you refused to bleed for their entertainment. You didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing you unravel. You broke the pattern by not repeating the behavior that hurt you. That's not submission. That's evolution. You turned every urge to react into proof that you've outgrown the version of yourself they were still fighting. Your calm wasn't passive. It was power with patience. It was you saying, "I can destroy this, but I'd rather build something better." And that decision alone flipped the entire dynamic. You showed that control isn't about suppression, it's about direction. You aimed your energy toward progress, not pettiness. And that scared people who rely on chaos to feel relevant. Restraint became your revolution because it exposed what everyone else was hiding, their dependence on drama. You didn't give in to the emotional economy of outrage. You became the disruption, the calm in the storm that refused to perform. And when the dust settled, everyone realized something profound. You didn't just survive the chaos, you transcended it. You proved that real change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes, stands tall, and says nothing. Because restraint, when rooted in purpose, is the kind of strength that rewrites every rule about what power looks like. Number 13. You didn't outshine them. You outlasted them. You learned that true victory doesn't always come from being the brightest in the room. It comes from being the one who's still standing after everyone else burns out. You didn't rush to prove your worth or compete for attention. You just stayed consistent while they exhausted themselves trying to be impressive. You moved with quiet persistence, knowing that time reveals everything: effort, authenticity, and endurance. While they played for applause, you played for legacy. And in the long run, legacy always outlives noise. People underestimated you because you weren't loud about your progress. They mistook your patience for passivity, not realizing that you were building something they couldn't maintain. You weren't trying to outshine them. You were outgrowing them. You knew that some people's success burns fast because it's fueled by validation, not vision. You didn't crave the spotlight. You respected the process. That's why when the chaos faded, your name was still relevant, your integrity still intact. Consistency became your quiet revenge. You didn't retaliate, you outlasted. You let their own impatience disqualify them. While they were busy performing success, you were actually creating it. You kept showing up even when no one was clapping, even when things moved slower than you hoped. Because you understood that real strength isn't built in moments of excitement. It's forged in seasons of endurance. You proved that longevity beats loudness every single time. You didn't have to chase validation or match anyone's pace. You let time do the sorting, and it did. The pretenders fell off, the opportunists got exposed. And you stayed solid. You stayed true. You stayed growing. You became the example that consistency is the ultimate flex. Because while others fade after the hype, you're still here, evolving quietly, building steadily, and proving that integrity isn't about how bright you shine. It's about how long your light lasts when everyone else's burns out. Number 14. You redefined what strength looks like. You changed the meaning of strength without ever announcing it. You stopped seeing power as the ability to dominate a room or win every argument. You realized real strength is found in self-control, in staying grounded when everything around you tries to pull you out of character. You didn't need to shout to prove your point, and you didn't need to humiliate anyone to reclaim your peace. You stood in your truth, unshaken, and that quiet confidence became louder than any confrontation ever could. You learned that strength isn't about appearing untouchable. It's about being unbreakable when touched. You faced disrespect, betrayal, and humiliation. But instead of responding with vengeance, you chose refinement. You didn't let your pain turn you cruel. You didn't let your disappointment turn you bitter. You turned disgrace into dignity by staying aligned with who you are, even when circumstances tried to make you someone else. That's not weakness. That's transformation at its highest form. Most people only recognize strength when it's loud, but yours spoke through composure. You taught people that real power isn't in reaction, it's in regulation. You didn't waste time proving yourself to those who were never going to see you clearly. You let your consistency, your grace, and your evolution speak for you. And over time, that became your statement. Not the things you said, but the person you became. You turned your lowest moments into your greatest evidence. Every insult that was meant to shame you became a stepping stone toward wisdom. Every loss built emotional muscle. You stopped trying to be understood and focused on becoming unshakable. You redefined strength by refusing to perform it. You lived it. You embodied it. You showed that power isn't loud, it's lasting, and that the most powerful people aren't the ones who break others down, but the ones who refuse to break themselves no matter how hard they're pushed. Conclusion. Everything they threw at you was meant to crush you, but instead it clarified you. You faced manipulation, betrayal, humiliation, and pressure, yet you didn't fold. You analyzed, adapted, and evolved. Every move you made in silence became a declaration that maturity isn't weakness, it's mastery. While they tried to drag you into chaos, you were building a kingdom of calm within yourself. You didn't fight for validation, you became the validation. You didn't chase justice, you embodied it. You learned that reacting gives power away, but responding from peace reclaims it. You didn't let anger define your story, you let composure write it. And in doing so, you turned every painful chapter into proof that growth is not always glamorous. Sometimes it's silent, strategic, and unseen. You handled disgrace like a professional handling evidence, cleanly, carefully, purposefully. You proved that grace under pressure isn't just admirable, it's revolutionary. They expected you to lose your voice, but instead you found your tone, steady, clear, and unbothered. You stopped trying to prove your worth to people who were never qualified to judge it. You refused to match their chaos, and by doing that, you became the very thing they feared, undeniable. Because the truth is, peace is intimidating when you've mastered it. It makes noise without saying a word. You outlasted their drama. You turned pain into posture. You chose restraint over revenge, dignity over display, and evolution over ego. What they called weakness became wisdom. What they called silence became strategy. And now your very existence is the evidence that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just endures. This is your story of transformation, of turning contamination into clarity and pain into purpose. You didn't just survive what happened. You graduated from it. So when people look at you now, they don't see the victim they once mocked. They see the architect of their own exposure, the calm after their storm, and the one who rose without bitterness. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful content like this. Like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that silence can be strength and composure can be revolution. Because what you just read isn't just survival, it's evolution in motion. Stay blessed always.